I never wanted to return. Not after the separation. Not after my father ceased. The calls faded. The messages ceased, and the facade of concern vanished as I returned home from college for the holidays, only to find myself alone. Out of the blue, he called and said he got remarried. He mentioned wanting me to meet her. She mentioned that she had been inquiring about me, and that last part lingered in my mind. Why was she asking about me? Even though I felt a mix of emotions, it was hard to shake off the thought that it worked something within me, changed perhaps a sense of wonder or solitude. Absolutely, I secured a flight. The place felt different, larger, chillier, and filled with a unique energy of items that were neither his nor mine. And she stood there in the doorway, grinned, her bare feet softly touching the cool floor, the silky pale robe draping elegantly around her, exuding an air of effortless luxury. "You must be Tessa," she said, whispered softly, her tone rich and inviting, like a gentle breeze on a summer evening. I've heard so much about you." Her gaze held a lingering intensity, neither polite nor maternal. My throat dried instantly as my dad appeared behind her, completely unaware, his voice cutting through the moment. With a joyful heart, he embraced me, while she stood nearby, her smile lighting up the moment, still in place. But her gaze was sharper now, calculating. I wasn't sure what I was anticipating, yet it wasn't her. She was youthful, not quite in college but certainly not old. Enough to be hers, not really 30, maybe 32. Close enough that if I saw at a bar, I wouldn't hesitate. Her name was Elise. Elise, the name lingered on my lips. The tense dinner was filled with uncomfortable silences as my dad went on about real estate and stocks. Elise continued to pour more wine into my glass, her fingers lightly grazing mine each time she leaned over the table. Initially, I believed it was just a fluke. But the second time, I realized it was intentional. Her touch lingered. Her nails brushed against my skin. Wrist, I glanced up and caught her gaze. She smiled at me, not at my dad. If you appreciated this content and wish to show your support for the channel in a meaningful way, consider clicking the thanks button below. It's the one featuring the heart and $ icon with super thanks. Allows you to make a direct contribution to the channel, which supports my journey in crafting amazing content for you. While I hardly caught what he was saying, I could hardly recall my reply. My skin was alive with sensation as I spoke. I found myself lost in thought, attributing the flutter in my chest to nerves, perhaps the wine, or the strange feeling of being back home. But as she moved to the kitchen, I felt her presence right behind me, her clothes brushing against mine. "Let me help," she offered, her voice warm and inviting. She whispered as I turned, the two of us secluded, the sound of my dad's fork clinking resonating in the dining room. Elise entered, her body grazing against mine, her fragrance enveloping me. Surrounded by the intoxicating scent of jasmine and sandalwood, she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper, drawing me in with every word. It was nothing like I had imagined. I took a deep breath, trying to process my thoughts. What had I really expected? Her smile took on a mischievous edge as she sauntered away, her hips swaying with an alluring confidence, leaving me breathless and ignited. That night, sleep eluded me, kept noticing her in that robe, the curve of her collarbone, the way her hair cascaded around her shoulders, the depth of her gaze, had fixed her gaze on me as if she were peeling away my layers in her mind. I despised her. I despised the way she made me feel. I loathed that my father had touched her, kissed her, and married her. The following morning, I descended the stairs to discover her in the kitchen, clad only in a tank top and shorts that scarcely dressed. She stood barefoot once more, coffee cradled in one hand, phone in the other. One morning, she glanced at me, her eyes dancing over my figure. "Sleep well?" she asked, and I nodded in response, struggling to maintain composure. She wondered about her father's early meeting as she took a sip of her coffee, lips red and soft. "It's just us." The words landed like a challenge. Her brow lifted, a playful glint in her eyes. "You like doing that, don't you? Flirting with me. Your partner's daughter." A pause filled with tension, followed by a slow, captivating smile. When she gazes at me with that longing, my heart races against my ribs. She moves closer, one step, then another, then paused inches from me, her voice softening. "Do you?" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. A fleeting moment, then she turned and walked away. Once more, I found myself standing there, trembling with a mix of fury and exhilaration, feeling more alive than I ever had before. Months ago, I should have walked away that day, gathered my things, and returned to campus. I acted as if everything was normal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I lingered because my curiosity was too strong to resist what she might choose to do next, as I longed for her to repeat the experience. feeling the thrill already coursing through me. Lost in the depths, sleep eludes me once more. Not truly, not with the heaviness of her breath lingering close, still smoldering against my ear, not with her voice echoing like a hidden truth I never wanted to bear. I spent the night, entwined in tangled sheets, gazing at the ceiling, pondering the true essence of Elise, hidden beneath that silk robe and allure. As the morning light filtered through the window, I put on a brave face. I showered and slipped into my favorite denim, ready to face the day. The snug white tank top clung just a bit too tightly to be considered casual. I found myself torn between wanting to tease her or I wanted to keep my guard up. But when I stepped into the kitchen and found her gaze fixed on me, I realized that my decision wasn't solely for my own sake. "Morning," I said, reaching for the coffee. Her gaze was intense, almost smoldering. "That shirt," she said with a hint of playfulness, "should come with a warning label." I blinked, curious. "Why?" She smiled. "Because it's going to get someone in trouble." I attempted to laugh it off, but my fingers quivered around My father walked in. Seconds later, blissfully unaware of the charged atmosphere around us, the tension hung in the air between his daughter and his new wife as we shared breakfast. Pretending everything was normal, even though her gaze felt heavy on me. She wanted to peel my skin off slowly, as if I didn't want her to that day. We arrived at the country club, where Elise donned a white tennis skirt, a snug tank top, and stylish sunglasses that gave her an air of mischief. She didn't seem to play with much enthusiasm, or perhaps she simply didn't mind. Her serves lacked energy, and her movements were lackadaisical, so captivating, so intentional. She leaned down frequently, adjusting her shirt with a hint of allure. Too often, my father dismissed it with laughter, enchanted by the moment. While I felt a deep urge to scream later, she took a call, and Elise pulled me behind a hedge wall near the pool. Her fingers curled around my wrist. Her breath was warm and intimate. She whispered, "Tell me to stop," as her gaze lingered on her. "Lost in thoughts of you, I wonder if I should pull away. But the truth is, I can't." I didn't want to, not with her. Fingers brushed along the edge of my tank top, and she whispered, "No, I didn't think so." And then she turned and left, just as she always did, leaving me trembling, engulfed in a fire of emotions, struggling to stay afloat, caught in a whirlwind of desire and regret. I loathed her for it. I despised the way she toyed with my emotions, as if I were nothing more than a game to her, some plaything she could set in motion and leave behind. That evening, I overheard them through the wall, my father, her laughter mingling with soft sounds. Nails dug into my pillow as I fought against the noise that filled the room. I longed to scream, to let it all out. But instead, I pressed my face into my sheets and reflected on how her fingers had lightly grazed my hip that morning, how her lips had nearly... The rain fell softly the next day as we found ourselves wrapped in each other's warmth while my dad was away at a meeting. The city faded away, leaving only the two of us in the vast, echoing house that Elise discovered. There I was, nestled on the couch in the library, lost in a world of fiction. While she simply observed without a word, she settled next to me, her bare knee brushing against mine, a sweet scent of vanilla mingling with an exhilarating hint of danger. "Is it your habit to read with your lips just a bit parted?" she asked, and I fell silent. "Do you always flirt with girls?" "My, half your age. Only the ones who flirt back." "I'm not flirting," she insisted, leaning in closer. Her lips were so close, "and you haven't stopped since you walked through that front door. You're married to my father, and you're resting in the room beside me." Her fingers lightly brushed against my thigh. "Leaves us both in a tangled mess." I should have distanced myself. I should have raised my voice instead of just standing there, closed my eyes, her breath igniting a warmth against my skin. And then the door. My dad came home early, and Elise sprang up, effortlessly composed and enigmatic. "We should discuss literature more often," she said with a casual air. And then she left as if she hadn't just unraveled my whole world felt altered as I sat there. Breathless, legs quaking, the warmth enveloping me, radiating up my spine. I wasn't just in danger, I was already surrendering, and I was at a loss, unsure of how to put an end to it. For 2 days, I made an effort to steer clear of her, keeping to myself. In a world where I felt lost, I avoided meals, pretending migraines consumed me. I immersed myself in a sea of fabricated assignments and incomplete essays, hiding from the reality around me, that I gazed at for what felt like an eternity. Paralyzed by the thought of reaching out, I didn't want to confront her. I couldn't bear it. Each time I shut my eyes caught her lips lingering close to mine. Feeling the gentle caress of her fingers on her voice echoed in my mind, urging me to halt. Yet, I remained silent, never uttering a refusal. I hadn't even attempted, and that frightened me more than anything. My father knocked on my door on the third night. She appeared with a hint of worry in her eyes, a touch of exhaustion evident in her demeanor, and an almost palpable tension in the air. Feeling a bit guilty, I replied, "I'm okay, Tess, I just need some rest." He lingered for a moment, concern etched on his face. "Elise is worried about you," he said softly. "You?" I flinched. Of course, she is. She says she thinks you don't like her. She's right, he sighed, rubbing his neck. I know this feels strange, us tying the knot so quickly, but she brings me joy. His words hit me hard, and I nodded again, deceiving him, and I said to myself, good, I'm happy for you. He left, and Elise walked in an hour later. She entered without a sound, draped in silk once more, this time a deep burgundy that hugged her form, like a second skin. Her hair was damp, freshly washed, curling slightly around, her jaw flushed as if she had just emerged from a warm bath. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. So, she said, her gaze fixed intently on, you're avoiding me now. I said, my voice trembling. You shouldn't be here, but my dad is asleep. She stepped forward. You look like you haven't slept either. That's your fault. Mine, she purred. I didn't touch you. Tessa. She stood before me now, mere inches apart, her fingers lightly brushing against my wrist. But perhaps I should have. I couldn't breathe. Her scent enveloped me, lingering in the air around us. The atmosphere overwhelmed reason. Stop. My voice faltered. You keep insisting that word, she whispered, but you never truly mean it. Then she kissed me deeply, passionately. Her lips met mine with a force I hadn't anticipated, like a tide rushing in, and I gasped as she seized the moment. Her tongue slid past my lips, tasting and claiming, and I realized I should have pushed her away, screamed and pulled away. But instead, I kissed her back as if I had been longing for this moment. For years, my hands held her waist, drawing her nearer. Her robe parted, unveiling. The warmth of her skin felt exquisite beneath my touch. As she sighed softly against my lips, the sound intoxicating, shattered me, and then she stepped back, breathless, a smile on her lips, as if to say it wasn't so difficult after all. Was it you who married my dad? I whispered, feeling shame wash over me like ice. And yet you're the one tugging at my robe. I stepped back, dread washing over me, urging you to stop. Her smile remained unwavering. You'll crave my presence once more tomorrow. And she was right. The following day, my feelings for her intensified. I despised her more than I ever had, yet my desire for her grew stronger. She behaved in a way that only fueled my emotions, as if the morning had been just another ordinary moment. She chuckled at my father's humor and passed me. A glass of orange juice grazed her fingers against mine beneath the table, a seemingly accidental touch that ignited a warmth in my skin. Couldn't eat, couldn't think. When my dad left to run errands, she found me in the garden. She donned sunglasses and a one-piece swimsuit that clung to her like a second skin as she settled beside me, on the lounge chair, our thighs brushing against each other. She asked me to confess I didn't enjoy it. Her voice was low and filled with an enticing danger, challenging me to deny the effect she had on me. My heart raced, caught in the thrill of the moment, wondering why I felt this way. Are you doing this to me because you're the only one in this house who doesn't deceive themselves? Her hand glided along my thigh. You desire me, Tessa. I bit my lip and closed my eyes. I can't. But you already. As she leaned in, her lips grazed my jaw, and I knew she would again. Then, she stood back, sauntering toward the pool. She dove in with an elegance that captivated me, her body slicing through the water like silk. I sat there, nails biting into my palms, entranced by her grace, clenching my fists, questioning how much longer I could maintain the facade of not being captivated by the one woman who was always out of reach, and, worst of all, I was starting to think she'd catch me when I did the worst part. Wasn't the kiss, it wasn't her fingers on her. The warmth of my skin ignited by the heat that surged within me whenever she softly uttered my name. A secret just for us was the most intense part. Everything appeared so ordinary from the outside. My dad kissed her cheek at dinner, and she smiled, expressing her gratitude. She poured her wine, laughter bubbling up as he made silly jokes about the weather. Then she turned, and our eyes locked over her glass. Her lips barely parted, as if she were contemplating the sound that escaped me when our mouths met. I was losing my mind, attempted to dismiss it as mere infatuation, lust, or curiosity. I even researched articles. Exploring the complex emotions surrounding an unexpected attraction can be challenging, especially when it involves someone you once held negative feelings towards. The psychological impact of such desires can lead to confusion and conflict within oneself. Myself for how I couldn't take my eyes off her, how I craved more, how my mind kept wandering to endless possibilities, moments that could shatter everything. Yet that evening, after one too many glasses of wine, she discovered me in the guest room. Once more, I was unaware of the door creaking open, oblivious to the sound of her steps. Yet I sensed her presence, like a change in the atmosphere. I turned, and there she was, draped in a black silk slip that embraced her form like a second skin. No makeup, hair tied up, just her raw and captivating presence. Can't sleep, she asked, but I didn't. She stepped forward, her gaze intense. Me neither. You need to stop coming in here. Do you? I felt my jaw tighten as she took another step forward, a liar in my eyes. I stood up, determined. Heat courses through me, a fire igniting beneath my skin. You're tied to my father, yet here you are, lingering in my space. You're unraveling me, perhaps even more than I realize. You needed to be undone. Her voice was gentle, tinged with melancholy as she reached up and touched. My cheek tingled as I flinched, yet I stayed right where I was. You think I planned this? She whispered, her voice low and teasing. You think I anticipated meeting her daughter and feeling those fingers curl under my chin, compelling me to meet her gaze? I've never felt this way about anyone before, not even him. I shook my head in disbelief. It's just not right, she whispered, her lips grazing mine. It's really not. And then she kissed me again and I surrendered, allowing her to envelop me, to unravel me, to take me in completely with that unattainable lips. Her touch ignited my senses, her form tender and insistent against mine. I drew her nearer, filled with a mix of anger and longing, a hunger that felt insatiable. We held back, not crossing that line. That night, she drew back just in time, heart racing, her forehead gently resting against mine. Against mine, I desire you, she whispered, her voice trembling, but I need you to feel the same way. Not merely for the pleasure it brings, nor solely due to its taboo nature. And then I was left there, trembling and bewildered, yearning for the next day. I chose to avoid her once more. I confessed, my dad, I wanted to step out on my own, just to take a walk and clear my mind. He smiled, looking relieved. I was finally finding my place. So I strolled into town, grabbed a coffee, and took a seat on a bench, lost in thought, to read a book but couldn't concentrate. Her voice lingered in every line, her scent woven into her touch lingered on my skin, a secret I couldn't hide even when I tried. She stood by the stairs, a silent presence, her gaze speaking volumes. My dad was upstairs, oblivious to the tension in the air. As we sat together, her fingers brushed against mine for just a fleeting moment before she slipped away into the shadows. That evening, I reached my limit and approached her softly. Be careful. I stood in her doorway, breath caught in my throat. She turned, surprised. Tessa. I'm not drunk, I said, stepping in. I'm not confused. I know what this is. Her eyes widened, yet she remained still. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I replied. Shut the door softly, and as she stepped forward, I felt the air between us shift, each movement drawing us closer. We're kissing again, this time with no hesitation, no guilt, just pure hunger for her. Hands held tightly to my hips, drawing me closer to her, my fingers weaving through her hair. Every part of me longed for her, and still we didn't cross that line. Not yet. She pulled away, her breath quickening. If we begin this, we've already crossed a line. You could shatter me. Then let's ignite our passion, and I truly meant it. I no longer cared about the implications. I didn't care about her marriage or the morality of it all. I only knew one thing. I desired her deeply, and I was already too far gone to reconsider my path. That night we drifted off separately, not sharing the same bed. But after I stepped out of her room, our lips lingered in my thoughts, swollen skin, tingling pulse still racing from her hands all over my body. I lay in mine and gazed at the ceiling for hours, still feeling the warmth of her lips on my neck. The softness of her whispers wrapping around my heart, like a prayer with teeth. My thighs trembled at the memory of how close we had come. Yet we hadn't crossed that final line. We were teetering on the brink, clinging to a fragile thread that was unraveling quickly. In the morning light, she exuded a serene composure, kept her composure flawlessly as she stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee. When my dad walked in moments later, kissed her cheek as if everything was perfectly fine, while I struggled to hold myself together, pretending I wasn't crumbling inside. Pretending I hadn't spent the night in her bed. Yet here she was, her tongue exploring my mouth, her breath warm against my collarbone. I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. At her, and I sensed each subtle shift, each fleeting look, every brush of her fingers. Brushed the counter just a little too close to mine. I left the table early, claiming I had a headache. My mind was a tempest. Thoughts scratching at the walls of my consciousness, the weight of guilt pressing down on me like a heavy shroud than anything I'd ever held. But beneath it lay something more sinister, something I yearned to embrace. Once more that afternoon, I discovered her in the garden, sitting by herself on the edge of She sat by the fountain, legs crossed, her phone left behind, sunglasses resting atop her head. She glanced up, her hair cascading around her, and I kept moving forward until I reached her. Standing right in front of her, I said, I need to talk to you. Her expression was unreadable. Here, he's on the phone, upstairs. He won't come down. She nodded slowly. Then I hesitated, the words lingering in the air. Something was clawing at my throat. What is this? I asked, bewildered by whatever was happening. Between us, what does it mean to you? Elise stood slowly, as if every movement was deliberate. She moved closer, her gaze locking onto mine. It's risky, she whispered, and self-centered and unattainable. I took a deep breath. But is it genuine? Her fingers brushed. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It's the only thing that feels genuine to me. Me right now. Her voice trembled. I didn't see this coming. I didn't desire this. But I can't stop thinking about you, can't stop needing you. I held her wrist, my heart racing. Then why do you keep stepping back? Because I can't provide what you seek. Yet you remain unaware of my true desires. You seek someone who can embrace you openly. But I can't be that person. I'm committed to your father. Tessa, it was you who initiated the kiss, and I haven't stopped feeling this way about myself since then. I pressed my forehead to hers. Please, stop kissing me. Stop looking at me like that. Stop making me fall for you. Her hands cradled my face. If I stop, will you? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. I don't think I can. Her lips met mine once more, lingering and intense, a kiss brimming with regret and an irresistible pull, vows that slipped through our fingers. And then she stepped back. We must tread lightly. We're beyond that caution, so we must find a way. Determined to be wiser that evening, I promised myself I wouldn't visit her room and secured my door, slipped on my headphones, attempting to drift off. But around midnight, a gentle knock interrupted the silence. As she opened the door, there she was, dressed in a cozy hoodie and leggings, her hair pulled back, and no makeup on her face. In a tangled mess, she appeared more youthful, delicate, and fragile. May I come in? I asked as I stepped forward. She sat on the bed, pulling her knees up, a sense of uncertainty washing over her. I don't know how to stop this, she whispered softly. Me neither. She gazed at me. I don't want to cause you pain, so please don't deceive me about it. What about what this is? Her silence spoke volumes, and then for the first time, she opened up to me about the deep loneliness she had felt, how swiftly everything had unfolded in her marriage, and how it just wasn't what she had hoped for. Affection isn't solely about the comfort she believed she had discovered until I entered and shattered all her preconceived notions about who she was. I see you, she murmured, and I don't want to. I can't keep doing this. I pressed my lips to hers gently, savoring the moment as we lay there, fully dressed, just embracing one another, fearful of the dawn. As we both understood that this moment couldn't last, not eternally, it simply wasn't meant to be. It was no longer merely about the kiss, the excitement of her lips brushing against mine, the warmth radiating from our bodies, or the thrill of the risk involved. Being discovered had transformed into something deeper, more intricate, and laden with unspoken emotions, more terrifying. I wasn't just falling for her, I was already completely hers. Every glance, every whisper, every time she reached for my hand on the table or brushed against the small of my back when no one was watching, I found myself changed in ways I couldn't explain. Each morning, I awoke with thoughts of her laughter and the way she carried the scent of jasmine with her, and the tempestuous atmosphere surrounding her. I took note of how her voice softened when fatigue set in, etching it into my memory. The curve of her smile, the way her eyes narrowed when she feigned indifference. I observed her in those moments when she was unaware. I found myself drawn to her, uncovering her rhythms and hidden truths, and my desire only grew as we began to explore together, discovering those precious instances when we could steal away to the laundry room, the gentle hum of the dryer in the garage creating a cozy backdrop as the door closed behind us, partially ajar in the stillness of the night. When the house was hushed, and my father was in slumber, and she would quietly slip into my room and settle next to me, her presence a comforting silence, a gentle kiss on my shoulder, followed by her face nestled against my neck, felt like a secret shared between us. At times, she shed soft, unspoken tears that I wasn't meant to witness. I never inquired about the reason. I clutched her closer, a thrill of fear coursing through me. We're going to get caught, I whispered one night, fully aware of the risk, she said, yet she continued to approach me, and I found myself unable to resist inviting her closer. Moments stretched out, becoming more daring as the boundaries faded. One afternoon while we were out golfing with friends, she suddenly pulled me into the downstairs bathroom and kissed me so passionately that my knees went weak. Her hands gripping me tightly, were desperately pulling at my clothes, her breath hot against my ear. We hadn't crossed that line yet, but we were teetering on the edge, my hand slipping beneath her shirt. Her lips brushed against my collarbone, and I found myself moaning her name into the softness of her shoulder. Suddenly, the sound of the front door creaking open made us freeze in place. Breathless and flustered, she gently pushed me away, adjusted her clothes, and ran her fingers through her hair. As I brushed my lips against her hair, I struggled to catch my breath. We quietly slipped away, each in our own direction. It felt as if the world had continued spinning, yet my father's gaze lingered on me with an unsettling intensity. During dinner, he broke the silence, his voice laced with concern, asking if everything was all right, if I was trying to adjust, if I was truly happy. I would have said so, but I lied. Elise didn't meet my gaze. the weight of remorse began to envelop me, sneaking in during my solitude, especially when I gazed at my father and recognized the depth of his trust and love for me. I was dismantling him from the inside, all while he remained blissfully unaware. I attempted to create some space between us. I lingered outside longer, took solitary drives, and left her messages unanswered. I thought it would shatter me, but instead, it shattered her. One night, she trapped me in the garage as I feigned searching for something in storage. "Why are you avoiding me?" she asked, her voice tense. "Because this feels forbidden. It always has been, but that never held us back before." Should have then said it as she stepped closer. "Say you don't want me. Say it to me, my face, and I'll never touch you again." I opened my mouth, but no words escaped. "That's what I thought," she murmured, her fingers brushing against mine as I surrendered to the moment, closing my eyes, leaning into her warmth like I was starving for it. I whispered, "I'm scared. What if he finds out?" "He won't. He's not stupid, but he's blind," she replied, drawing me close. I pressed my lips against hers with an urgency that felt all-consuming, as if I craved her entirely, her to remain genuine, to continue being there for me when everything else began to fade. That night, I allowed her to take off my clothes for the first time. It wasn't complete, but it was enough to feel her lips against my skin, her warmth, breath warm against my chest, a sensation that lingered, making me feel as if I could never truly be free of it. And I never intended for it to happen. But when I opened my eyes the following morning, she was no longer there, and my room felt empty, chilly, her side of the bed unoccupied. And on the pillow next to me, a neatly folded note. The paper bears my name in her delicate handwriting, but I haven't opened it yet. I just can't bring myself to do it. Not just yet, because I already sensed that whatever unfolded next would lead us to a point of no return. I found myself unable to open up that letter right away. It nestled in my back pocket like a smoldering secret, murmuring promises and fears with every shift of my body. I felt the feeling washed over me, and I tried to convince myself that I could resist, that I was more resilient than she was. Yet, when I lay in bed at night, unable to sleep, my mind curled around her words. "Tell me to leave you alone." And in that moment, my heart stood silent, ensnared by her presence, a mix of fear and longing coursing through me. She acted just like any other day, too much like it, as she chuckled over breakfast. My dad's joke complimented his tie as it brushed past me in the hallway. Almost like a fleeting moment of connection, she wasn't the one who caused my downfall. I couldn't meet her eyes, yet I could still sense her gaze cutting through me. Everything about her whispered caution. Yet I was pulled nearer to that fire, the tension wrapping around me like a serpent, squeezing every breath until I thought I might suffocate each time she walked by. In that fleeting instant, just a heartbeat away, I could have drawn her close, enveloping her in my very essence. Yet I held back. Fear gripped me, entwined with guilt and a deep longing that terrified me more than anything I had ever experienced. That afternoon, I found myself lost in those overwhelming emotions. I discovered a reason to break free. I told my dad I needed some fresh air, that the heat of the city was overwhelming. My legs moved me forward, through the garden, across the lawn, past the fountain where months ago as a child, I tossed coins and made wishes. I recalled those youthful dreams, so innocent and radiant. Now each desire seemed like a deception weighed heavily on my heart as I perched at the edge of the fountain. Legs crossed, my head cradled in my hands, struggling to process the turmoil within. Search for a glimmer of understanding in the chaotic feelings that enveloped me. I came to see how hollow the existence I returned to truly was. The house stood with its walls intact, yet felt devoid of life. My father's laughter reverberated emptily through the rooms. The furniture appeared lavish yet devoid of warmth, resembling a carefully crafted backdrop. And Elise, she was the crowd, the performer, the blaze that loomed dangerously close. My breath caught in my throat as I tightened my grip, my hands clenched, battling the tempest within. Yet I found myself yearning for her even more than I needed to breathe. I returned to a quiet home. It felt so empty without her presence. As I placed her empty cup in the sink, my eyes caught a single strand of her hair resting on the countertop. The sight overwhelmed me, and I felt my knees weaken. I came to understand that I was gradually coming apart. I couldn't regain my composure because every fiber of my being yearned to draw her closer, within me, and never release. Yet that would shatter everything my father, my family, my own future. Destruction danced enticingly just beyond that boundary, and I wanted to take a step forward that evening, even though I had planned to retreat to my room and become invisible. But she caught me in the hallway, just standing there with arms crossed, exuding a sense of vulnerability like a wounded creature. I should have gracefully moved past her and slipped away. But instead, I paused. My heart raced, threatening to leap from my chest We need to talk, she said, her voice unsteady, almost tinged with desperation. Appeared more delicate than I had ever noticed. The silk robe she wore draped softly, even as it bore the heaviness of her feelings. I suppressed every urge. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I nodded, and we walked side by side toward the gathering. As the shadows of the house stretched behind us, I gently closed the door, half anticipating the door, waiting for a sign, the air thick with anticipation. She felt the weight of the moment, heart racing, as shadows danced around her in the soft glow. I longed to wrap her in my embrace, to offer her comfort, but the risk held me back. It was she who broke the silence first. "You're avoiding me," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion so deep and unguarded, I couldn't quite place it. Guilt, fear, love. "I just wanted to keep you safe," I murmured softly. "Protect you from me." The words echoed emptily, even to my own ears. Stepped closer, closer than what was deemed appropriate or sensible, her breath uneven, her gaze intense. "Desperate, you believe I should be the one shielding you," she remarked, "but just look at us." She waved her hand between us as if she was challenging me to confront reality. "I don't want to stop. Do you?" Her question took me by surprise. I had practiced a facade, countless replies echoed in my mind. "Yes, I do. No, I don't. Yet." None of those words escaped my lips as I stood there. Quiet lips parched, pulse booming. Her touch discovered my own warm and sure. A painful connection pierced through me like a sudden jolt. "I no longer care about anyone else's joy," she murmured. "Just you." The revelation shattered a barrier within me. I shut my eyes, yearning to draw her closer. I just held her, telling her she was mistaken. But I needed it as well. And then that moment came, shattered like glass. I sensed her body tremble beneath me, and my gaze fell downward. Her complexion paling, face contorting in pain, my hand trembling in hers. I rushed. She leaned in closer, cupping her face gently. "What's wrong?" Her eyes widened, a shadow creeping in behind her. She knows I stumbled back, panic rising hot and fast, aware of what she suspects, almost chuckled at the fragility and softness of her voice. Realizing how much it had changed in this moment, couldn't even finish, tears welling in her eyes. "As you kissed me tonight when I believed you had moved on." Yet he was there, observing us. I noticed the way his gaze lingered on us. I shut my eyes. My father, my adversary, my heart shattered within me. "What shall we do?" she asked, stepped forward, holding onto my arms tightly. "We halt here." My stomach sank as I shook my head. "No, we can't. We will." She pressed her forehead to mine, tears shimmering with emotion. "Them for you, for me," I quivered. "You can't turn your back, I will." She whispered softly, like she was shattering and reconstructing. Within that instant, I felt the urge to weep. I longed to. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to cry out, "Please, don't go." Yet, all I could do was stand there, helplessly watching her walk away. She took a step back, then another, and just like that, she vanished, leaving only the memory of her presence behind. The house was silent, and as I brushed my fingers against the lingering scent, a wave of regrets washed over me, so profound it hurt within. I fell to the ground, and in that moment, I understood the conclusion. Anxiety loomed. The inevitable consequences were on the horizon, and retreat was not an option. He sensed it within me, buried deep beneath the surface. I'd always felt this moment was inevitable, yet I never anticipated how profoundly it would impact me. Striking with such intensity and swiftness, the atmosphere shifted suddenly, leaving me breathless as I stood at the entrance of the hallway, captivated by the sound of her voice echoing through the space. The walls echoed with the fury I had never encountered, and Elisa's voice sliced through the tension like a knife. But trembling, nothing occurred. She spoke a falsehood, a futile, transparent falsehood. "Don't. Go ahead. Insult me," he snapped. "I'm not blind. I've seen the way you look at her, and how she looks at you." My heart raced in my chest, rendering me motionless and voiceless. As the walls closed in around me, felt too close. The air tasted wrong. "You're paranoid," she said. But her voice quivered. "She's just a girl." "She's not just a girl," he snapped. "She's mine. Daughter." The words pierced through me, a wave of shame igniting my spine like flames. Stepped back from the threshold, heart pounding, chest tight. I missed the rest of. I dashed up the stairs to my room, slamming the door shut behind me as I sought refuge in my own space. Locking it with trembling fingers, I sank against it, my breath coming in, brief, shallow breaths. Everything was coming apart. I had ruined it all. Pressed my back against the wood and sank down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I felt lost, unsure of what to do next. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Elise didn't show up that night, and I spent hours tossing and turning, unable to find any peace. The atmosphere in this house was thick with tension, each creak resonating like a verdict, every whisper hanging heavy in the air. The breeze whispered secrets of longing as dawn broke. The stillness of the house enveloped me. I moved quietly, a shadow in the quietude, downstairs to find my dad already gone. Elise was at the table, lost in her thoughts. The coffee seemed to hold secrets she was desperate to uncover, her expression waning, a ghost of what once was. If a tempest had swept through her, leaving her amidst the ruins, I remained motionless at the base of the staircase. She looked up slowly. Our eyes met. I expected anger, coldness, distance, but what I witnessed there instead broke me apart. A profound, aching remorse that felt endless as I took a step forward slowly, my voice barely a whisper. What did he say? He asked if I loved you. Her voice was hollow as she spoke, and I felt a lump in my throat. What did you say? I asked, but I didn't respond. Why not? She gazed at her hands, torn between honesty and the weight of unspoken truths. My heart raced as I struggled to find the words, my throat tightening with unspoken feelings. I shifted closer, kneeling down, feeling the weight of the moment. Beside her chair, she asked softly, "Do you?" Finally, she looked up, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes," she replied. "God, yes." My heart shattered as I reached for her hand, and she allowed me to take it, our fingers intertwining, curling into mine as if they were meant to be there. "So what comes next?" I inquired. "He's presenting me with an ultimatum." She said it was either my departure or his presence. A chill ran through me. He said he would divorce me if I didn't sever all ties with you. No more. Words exchanged, yet distance grew, not even a shared space. I sighed, realizing that was it. "It's not a choice," she whispered, "and it's tearing me apart. What will you do?" Her gaze pierced through me, as if I were the sole truth in her universe. "What do you wish for me to do?" I remained silent, unable to respond. Caught in the moment, I was uncertain about my desires. But one thing was clear. I couldn't bear the idea of losing her. The mere thought of walking by her felt unbearable. The atmosphere felt heavy, and the distance between us was palpable. I found myself wanting to scream, retreating to the solitude of my room that night. Once more, I left the door ajar, just in case. I lingered, my gaze fixed on the clock. Midnight. She never arrived, and when I finally succumbed to slumber, the dreams were elusive, shallow and filled with haunting visions. I envisioned her lips growing cold, her eyes fading away, gazing past me as if I had already slipped away. By morning, she had vanished. There was no note, no explanation, just an absence. My dad mentioned she had left early, saying she needed to go. The moment she mentioned her trip to see her sister upstate, I sensed the truth was veiled. I understood she was hiding something from me, departed due to my presence, as remaining signified a decision for me, and that decision led to chaos. I roamed through the home. Like a whisper, I brushed against the places where she had been, inhaling the lingering scent of her perfume in the air. The hall and felt my chest tighten. Days passed. 2 for a week. She didn't come back. I ceased to nourish myself, neglected my hygiene, distanced myself from my father, and he allowed it. Perhaps he understood, was grieving too, or perhaps he simply didn't know how to express it. But then one night, a gentle knock echoed at my door. As I opened the door, she was there, drenched from the rain, her mascara running down her cheeks. With eyes full of desperation, I pleaded with her. I really tried. I pulled her inside and slammed the door behind us, and enveloped her in my embrace before words could escape us. We lingered there, drenched and trembling, kissing as if we had been waiting for this moment forever, shattered and reassembled in a way that felt off. "I can't imagine my life without you," she murmured. "Nothing else matters anymore." "Then don't go," I urged. "Stay with me. I'm ready to ignite this fire. All down if it means I get to be yours." Then let it ignite. That night we didn't. We embraced in the shadows, unashamed, pouring our hearts into each other as if time itself was slipping away. And in that moment, it truly felt like it was the life we once embraced, the deceptions, the apprehension, the caution. It all came to a close. And something fresh was unfolding, yet neither of us realized the price we would pay. Only that there was no turning back now. Not at all, as we had already descended into this depth. I stirred to the sensation of her hair brushing my cheek, and the warmth of her breath caressing my neck, bodies intertwined beneath the sheets, a delicate secret we had struggled to protect. For a fleeting moment, it felt like we were cocooned in our own little universe, untouched by the chaos beyond that door. Yet it loomed there, real and undeniable. The weight of it pressed down harder with every passing minute as she slowly opened her eyes, blinking at the soft gray light. Slipping through the curtains, she whispered, "We don't have much time." "I know," I replied. "I don't care." But deep down, we both did. The echo of the front door slamming downstairs shattered the fragile illusion we had woven through the night. My father was back, and this time I knew she wouldn't ignore the signs. I pulled on my clothes in silence while she stayed in bed, eyes wide and distant lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but the words eluded her. I leaned in and kissed her. One final moment lingered as I exited the room, my heart racing as if I had just leaped from a precipice. Uncertain whether I would find solace or plunge into the depths, or stone downstairs. My dad sat at the kitchen table, lost in the glow of his phone. I entered quietly, not bothering to glance his way. I slipped past him and opened the fridge without a word, feigning mastery over my own being. "She returns," he stated, his tone devoid of emotion. I nodded as she mentioned she had come to collect the remainder of her belongings. I closed them. "The fridge, is that all?" she said. He looked up, and for the first time I noticed it, the pain, the sense of betrayal, the ache of heartbreak. But above all, the weight of disappointment. "No, it's not that I didn't inquire about what else she mentioned. I didn't need to, as he was already aware of everything, or at least enough. You're not a young one," he went on, "and I can't express the emotions. But what unfolded here?" Her voice trembled as she brushed her fingers across her cheek, shattering something within her that she couldn't quite understand, to mend what was broken. I stood still, caught in the moment. "I never intended to cause you pain, yet here we were." His gaze holding mine tightly. "Onto mine you both did." And then she got up and walked away, leaving her coffee, half drunk, and his silence echoing more profoundly than any words he could have uttered. I held back tears. Not then, not when Elise descended with a tiny suitcase, her eyes swollen, hands trembling. Not when. She paused before him, her voice a soft murmur that slipped through the air, unheard by me. He remained silent, not even acknowledging her words. When she turned to me and gave me a look that conveyed everything: love, regret, farewell, I trailed behind her into the cool air, where the rain had begun to fall once more, a gentle mist that enveloped everything. Everything glimmered in silver. "Where will you go?" I asked. "I don't know," she replied. "Will I see you again? Do you want this more than anything?" "Then yes," she whispered. "Will I?" I kissed her, as if I was binding a promise. And then I saw her leave, my fingers clenched tightly, clenched my fists at my sides, my chest feeling empty from an unnamed ache that evening, I drifted through the house like a specter, my father's silence enveloping me as I remained unspoken. Attempt to reach out to her. We were two souls sharing the same fractured space, each of us holding on to a piece of the same sorrow. I attempted to find rest. But the bed, the chill of the room enveloped me, silence hanging heavy in the air. My body lingered on the memory of her presence, the comfort of her warmth, her breath against my skin. Days turned into a week. And still no texts, no calls, no sign of her. I began to question whether it had all been a figment of my imagination, a fleeting fantasy. But then, one evening as I returned home, everything shifted, to discover a note resting on my pillow. No envelope, just my name penned in her beautiful script. Within a secret space, two paths intertwine. Seek me when the moment is right. I will be here, patiently awaiting you. My knees buckled, and I found myself on the floor, the letter trembling in my grasp, the key pressing into my palm like a vow. It wasn't finished, not yet, but I had one last. The decision loomed before me, a pivotal moment that would alter my life forever as I gazed at that key. For hours, tracing my fingers along its contours, envisioning the entrance, it revealed her entrance, her universe, a life waiting to unfold, apart from the one we had, tarnished a future free from shame or scrutiny. I lost track of time as I sat there, but when I finally rose, my choice was clear. I couldn't remain in this place any longer, no longer in this place. Not with the quiet tension between my father and me expanding like an infinite sea. Packed lightly, just the essentials, my journal, my camera, the rings she once wore, left on my nightstand by accident and never took back. I left a note for my father, not to explain, because how do you even begin to share something so personal? Describe the experience of falling for the one woman you were never meant to be with, yet finding it necessary to say farewell and express gratitude, nurturing me for, embracing me for staying calm when everything fell apart. Then I got in the car and drove, uncertain of her whereabouts. The key was elusive, and I felt lost. Mention only the name of a town I faintly recalled her speaking of during our quiet, intimate conversations by the water, in a town filled with art galleries, where rainy weekends felt like a cozy embrace, and bookstores welcomed late-night wanderers. I drove through the night, lost in thought, heart racing, body numb with anticipation and fear. At one moment, I nearly turned back. As I parked at the gas station, I settled into the quiet of the night, the engine softly purring around me, convincing myself that I was incapable of moving forward, that I had already caused enough heartache that perhaps I should vanish entirely. But then I recalled the way her eyes sparkled when she whispered, "I'll be waiting," and I couldn't escape that. Not again. When I arrived in the town, the sun had just as dawn began to break. The streets lay deserted, shrouded in a delicate mist that embraced the trees. I navigated the quiet roads with a gentle pace, searching through each structure, each digit, until I discovered it, a quaint cottage by the lake, adorned with ivy climbing the porch, and a solitary light flickered in the window. I parked, my legs feeling weighted as I made my way inside. Up the path, the key slid into the lock with ease. As I stepped inside, the air was filled with her scent. The scent of lavender and the crackle of firewood mingled with an unidentifiable warmth as she sat there. The couch enveloped her in a sweater that swallowed her whole, leggings bunched beneath her knees, a warm cup of tea cradled in her hands, her gaze averted, astonished as if she had anticipated my arrival, as though she had been keeping track of every moment I was absent. I approached her directly after dropping my bag. Finding her standing there with the mug in hand, slipped from her hands, landing on the rug with a soft thud, and then we were in each other's arms, kissing as if the world, time seemed to freeze as she cupped my face, her thumbs gently wiping away the tears I didn't even know I had. "Noticed you came," she whispered. "Of course I did. I didn't know if you would." There was never another option. We sat on the floor, our knees touching, foreheads pressed together like, "I thought about you every second," she said. "I thought I was going. You were all I could think about." I confessed, my sole purpose. She drew me in tightly. Once more, we took our time. There was no urgency. We had all the time in the world ahead of us. Entwined in warmth, we shared a moment as she recounted the events of the past few weeks, revealing how she had secured the house for herself. With no plan, she strolled by the lake each morning, engaging in silent conversations with me, reflecting on how she managed to keep the lights on in her life. In the stillness of the night, I arrived, unable to quell the hope that surged within me. Even through the pain, I pressed my lips to hers, lost in the moment until she responded. Stopped trembling, and I vowed to her with my hands, with my lips, with every part of me, her that she would never have to experience that pain again. We spent the next few days creating a new rhythm, sharing coffee in, the gentle strolls in the afternoon, preparing meals side by side, and drifting off on the couch, wrapped in a serene stillness. Tranquil and genuine. One evening as we sat together, admiring the lake glisten beneath the fading light of the sunset, she grasped my hand gently and slipped something into my palm, a silver ring, identical to the one I had seen before, one I'd cherished all this time. "Hold on to it," she said, "so I don't lose you again, you won't." I vowed we would leave the past unspoken, allowing it to linger behind us like a shadow. Stripped of its influence, my father never reached out. Perhaps he couldn't, or maybe he simply didn't want to. Yet, there are moments when I imagined her sitting in that cold house, wondering if the silence between us would last forever, and maybe one day, when the pain had dulled, we would reconnect. But for now, I had discovered something I couldn't turn my back on, something unique, taboo, and exquisite that I possessed. I've developed feelings for my father's wife, and against all odds, she seems to feel the same way about me. In a realm where missteps and shattered conventions abound, we defiantly chose one another, standing strong against all odds. Everything, and in that quaint cottage by the lake, we began anew, no longer hidden from the world, not as errors but as something genuine, something that holds all the value of what we sacrificed to arrive at this moment. And for the first time, I wasn't fearful of embracing love. She had longed for this moment, and now that I was here, it felt like we had finally found our place. Thank you immensely for your support. Whether it's through liking, commenting, sharing, or sending your heartfelt thanks, create a meaningful impact here on the channel. Looking forward to our next encounter.